Now that my frets are in, they're filed flat, we've taken a bevel to them, they're looking good. I like the way that everything looks on the side of the binding. I am really happy with the way this has turned out so far. In preparation for putting a finish on the neck, I now have everything taped that I don't want to get a finish on. So the fretboard, the nut slot, underneath the fretboard where I want to glue this to the body of the guitar, have to make sure that I've got good wood-to-wood contact, so nothing touching here. The shoulders of the neck, I don't want to get any finished product on because I want a great contact between the neck and the shoulder of the guitar. And we are ready to start going through the grits. This has already gotten 80 and 120 when we did the shaping. So now I'm going to start with a 150. As I move up in grits, I do want to take care that I get all of these transition areas. So areas to watch out for are any curves that you have and anywhere that you curve from a long grain to an end grain, especially right here in the peg head where it transitions into this curve. So it's going from long grain into end grain and back. Some of you may have a different taper to your fretboard, but almost always we're going to have a little bit of transition here in this area. I've got curves here, I've got end grain on the peg head. If you've got a volute transition here as well as here, those are two trouble spots to pay attention to because as you transition into a different grain type, even if it's just slightly different, it's going to show differently, and we need to make sure that we hit all these areas very good and don't leave the scratch marks, because those end grain transitions tend to show the grit quite a bit more, and it is a little tougher to get those out because of how tough that grain is. The other area to watch for is definitely in this heel. As you certainly have seen by now, that getting into this heel, this end grain on the heel will be very tough to get those grit marks out of as we transition from long grain to end grain. And this end grain, we want to try and sand this way as much as possible, back and forth this way, rather than going vertical, because this vertical is going to show a lot more grit marks than going this way. So those are several things to keep track of. These grits are going to be easy to change the contour of your neck. So even though they're 150, 180, they can change because this mahogany is a lot softer than that ebony is going to be. You know, when we were working on prepping the fretboard, we could fly through those grits and be somewhat unconcerned with changing the contour of that fretboard. But the mahogany is a lot softer, so we do need to be careful. And when you round over these edges, you just want to touch on those bindings. Just enough to get rid of the marks that you'd put in there before. And on your heel cap, make sure that you're going with that grain. These contour sanders are especially nice for these transition areas like this, coming into the volute from the fret side. And you just have to make a determination of how subtle you want this transition to be for the volute. If you want this to be a real crisp edge, that's fine, go ahead and do that. I like to make mine a little more subtle and somewhat understated, just a soft transition right there. If you do have rosewood or ebony that is right next to some of your lighter woods, especially with an open grain like mahogany, just take a rag and brush that ebony dust or rosewood dust off so it doesn't embed itself too deeply into the grains. Inspect everything really, really well before you move on to that next grit, because the further you get away from it, the tougher it is to go back. So if I've got an 80 or a 120 scratch, I need to really make sure that I get that out before I'm at 220 or 320 and trying to sand that 80 or 120 grit out is just impossible. Okay, a little bit more. All right, 150 is done. Now we're going to hit this with 180. Same thing, up and down the neck, right over to the sides, getting a little bit of the binding on the side, then paying attention to the end grain and all the transition points. All at 180, we're going to get those 150 grit marks out of there. Now when we are finalizing the heel, make sure that you don't come over and round this off, either straight off or at an angle, and don't quite touch this edge, but don't round this edge off. We've spent so much time on this edge where the neck meets the shoulder of the guitar. Let's not ruin that right now, or not even later. Let's not ever ruin that. Hopefully by now, with this 180 grit, you are feeling like this neck is really smooth and that you don't feel any more rough spots at all, and that things are feeling quite nice. I'm digging it. Like one of my mentors said, use sandpaper like someone else is paying for it. If you have any inlays, be very careful to use a super flat sanding block and go over the area just enough to remove the scratch marks from the previous grit, and that is it. Go very lightly or you will soon be sanding right through your inlays. By the time you get to 220, or through 220 I should say, everything should start having kind of this super smooth, almost buttery feel to it. The sawdust that's coming off of here at 220 is going to be really, really smooth, and it's going to have a very slick texture to it. Going to make sure that my bindings got touched. All right. Now, if you are doing a film finish, 220 is an okay spot to stop. That's just fine. You can also go up to 320, but if you are doing a spray film, I wouldn't go up any further than 320. Or even if you're doing a French polish, that's probably where I'd terminate, is 220 or 320. That's going to be just fine. But I'm going to keep going up since I'm doing an oil. But first I am going to do a spray on the peg head. So this 220 that I just hit with that, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to do some rubbing alcohol, rub some alcohol across the top, see how that looks, see if I see any more scratches. It looks pretty good, but I want to make sure. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to tape everything off and spray the peg head here with a clear gloss lacquer, and then everything else is going to get oil. That looks good. All right. Okay, here we go at 320. Now moving into the 400 is almost starting to polish the wood. So at this 400, not only is it going to just start to really polish the wood, but it's going to leave it super smooth. Now that everything's been sanded to 400, things look good. They feel great. I think this neck is ready to go. I'll just get it wiped off a little bit here, and then we are ready to move on to finishing.